Let's speak now to Cynthia Stimpel, the SAA whistleblower, a year since President Cyril Ramaphosa received that last volume of the State Capture Commission. Cynthia, appreciate your time this afternoon. As a whistleblower who testified in the Zondo Commission, what are your thoughts on Chief Justice Raymond Zondo's criticism of Parliament for not adequately addressing the implementation of some of the Commission's recommendations?
I totally agree with Justice Zondo because, in effect, Parliament has not done anything, and there has been recommendations made by the State Capture Commission on what needs to happen, and none of those recommendations have been enforced or developed further or worked with. At the moment, he asked for electoral reform, yes, we know, as well as active citizenry within our country, and then the establishment of some agency for an anti-corruption commission and looking at state capture on an almost permanent basis. We find that civil societies have taken up the role in active citizenry, and even in the electoral reform, where they have been advocating on what needs to happen regarding the coming elections of 2024. And Zondo also made specific recommendations around whistleblower legislation and what needs to happen. And we haven't seen anything as yet.
I'm going to come to whistleblower legislation in a moment, but Parliament would argue, as did the Parliament spokesperson, Muluto Mutapo, that they need a little time. Now, in your mind, just how much time should they be given, granted that it's been a year since the submission of that final report?
Okay, Parliament knew about corruption for more than 10 years. Then that's when the Commission started. That was already 10 years. Then the Commission was on for almost 4 years, so that's 14 years. Then the Commission gave its findings in June 2022. So this is another year, 15 years. How much longer do they need? I'm sorry, that's a poor excuse. It's unacceptable.
Now, do you get the impression that Chief Justice Zondo has stoked the hornet's nest? Because one would imagine that some of those implicated or those that would be affected by the recommendations of the Zondo Commission are parliamentarians.
Yes, he has, because he actually put it to them that they need to be held accountable, that they should have been making some changes and enforcing some key accountability improvements in either Parliament and in various areas like the state-owned entities. For instance, the Parliament has oversight for all those entities, and they have not done any of that enforcement. So yes, I think there are, but teed off with him because he had just stated the truth.
So where we are now, in your opinion, is it important for Chief Justice Zondo to exercise caution and avoid statements or actions that may compromise his ability to adjudicate? Because this is what is implied.
You see, this is the fine-edged sword we all walk on. When you're trying to tell the truth, then you are victimized for it or retaliated against, which in this case, Judge Zondo has been retaliated against. If he had kept quiet, they would be then saying to him, like they treated De Ruyter, that why he had all the time at Scopa or at various parliamentary meetings where he didn't specifically state what he said afterwards in his interview and in his book. So I just feel as a judge, as a person who holds himself accountable, needs to be able to state what is currently happening. And that's all the Chief Justice has stated. He hasn't accused anyone. He is just saying that Parliament has not done what it was supposed to do. And if they don't do it, if they had done it earlier, we would have already saved so much money and stopped certain tracks of the corruption happening in our country. And now he's actually holding them accountable that they need to start doing something. So I think he's within his rights.
Now, let's talk a little bit about whistleblowers, if we can, for a moment, Cynthia. Now, when we read up on your profile, they describe you as a very, very brave individual. Now, one of the bravest individuals who unfortunately is no longer with us is Babita Deokaran, whom we all know was gunned down because of information that she had shared. Talk to us a little bit about your life as a whistleblower, and certainly how you feel about the work that you've done and whether or not any gratitude has been shown, certainly around protecting you and others that are whistleblowing.
Hugo, thank you. The normal citizen and South African are very much in praise of us as whistleblowers. They're the ones that call us the heroes. They're the ones that will tell us that we are people of courage. And we take that to heart because it's an affirmation and it's encouraging. What has transpired, though, from our legislation, we haven't seen changes happening in any of the legislation yet. We know that Department of Justice is working on some form of change. I believe they're doing some research, and they're doing it externally out of the country, but we haven't seen anything in a white paper that we could review as many interested parties and civil organizations working with whistleblowers. How was I treated? Yes, I didn't expect that I would have been dismissed from my work place, as well as many other whistleblowers did not expect that they'd be treated the way they did by just pointing out what was wrong or highlighting facts that were going against policies and procedures, or picking up fraud and actually highlighting it like Babita did. And Babita, in her sense, had raised it to her senior. So some people are doubting whether she's a whistleblower. The minute you raise it to your senior, issues that you're highlighting of corruption is reporting it, and that's what a whistleblower is, reporting some fraud or activity that is contravening what your normal processes are. So yes, whistleblowers have suffered. Many have lost their lives. Many have lost their homes. Many homes have been broken in as relationships. So what are we doing now as Whistleblower House is to assist whistleblowers in that sphere and advocating and working together with other like-minded organizations to see if we can improve, firstly, the circumstances of whistleblowers, and then secondly, improve our legislation, because I think that will play a huge role, and then making reparations. I believe that NLC chair has spoken out recently about making reparations in line with what SARS did, and I think that's the route to go.
So let's talk a little bit about the legislation that you speak of. Nothing has been implemented. You haven't seen a white paper. But if you were to contribute to that white paper, what would your contribution be?
So we definitely would love to add value to it. Is the way the current protected disclosures is written, it says no person making a disclosure should suffer occupational detriment. So we would change that in a way that the proof, the burden of proof should be not with the whistleblower, but with the organization, that they must do the full investigation at the cost of the organization. And when it's then proven that this whistleblower has been malicious or not done it in good faith, then yes, then certain sanctions can be given. But to immediately dismiss, suspend, fire a whistleblower, or treat them as they have been with extreme retaliation should not be allowed in the PDA. The second thing is that organizations and people who are complicit in the fraud, that they therefore have to be held accountable. So those clauses must be put into the PDA. It's currently not there. The third thing is about that should whistleblowers, those that have suffered, it should be far broader. It shouldn't just be based on their current employment. So those that have already suffered, there should be legislation, put in the new legislation, that there must be reparations made somehow. Obviously, we're not working on the basis of the U.S. False Claims Act and the SEC Commission with its quitam legislation, but rather that when a whistleblower has suffered through either financial loss or their career loss or through health loss, there has to be some reparations made. And that needs to be discussed further, obviously, with, but that needs to be in place in the legislation. Thank you.
Now, finally, before we let you go, when we look at the role of whistleblowers, and particularly those that are whistleblowing in government, there are quite a few. But there are also whistleblowers in private sector, because there's maybe not an equal amount of criminal activity, but there's also a lot going on. Do you get the same sort of reaction or leniency, if you will, in the private sector, that those that whistleblow are treated exactly the same?
They are indeed treated the same, Hugo. They also suffer the similar retaliation. We at Whistleblower House are seeing it, that we have a range of whistleblowers from both the private and public sector, from across the banks, from across accounting firms, even from NGOs, and even as small as a school governing board. So they are, and they are being retaliated. The minute they raise issues, they are being retaliated. And yeah, I feel it's a behavior that actually needs to change, because there's the behavior of, if you're in power, you're not going to listen to the small voice in the street or in your company, but you are going to it stops with me. I make the decision. I can get rid of this person. There's no investigation. And that happens. And even though we have ethics committees and we have compliance committees and we have internal audit committees, when that behavior is so strong that it's so powerful over other smaller jurisdictions in companies, it interferes with that. And it allows that compliance department or ethics department or even HR not to adhere to their own processes. HRS, for one, does not support any employee. They support the senior manager who gives them the directive on what to do. So if they are told to fire a person, they don't even investigate it and the reasons for it. They will just fire that person. And that, for me, is immoral. So we need to start looking at behavior from an unethical and immoral behavior. And I think that needs to inform our legislation changes. Thank you.
Cynthia Stimpel, SAA whistleblower, speaking to us this afternoon about whistleblowers across the country and how they're treated both in private sector and government. Well,